I want to thank patron supporter Kang Lai Tan for suggesting this video topic. If you'd like to suggest future video topics, please consider becoming a patron supporter at patreon.com/TJR, the original. While My Guitar Gently Weeps was written by George Harrison and was released in 1968 by the Beatles on their double vinyl self-titled album, more commonly referred to as the White Album. Harrison wrote While My Guitar Gently Weeps at his mother's house in Warrington as an exercise in randomness inspired by the Chinese I Ching, the Book of Changes. The Eastern concept is that whatever happens is all meant to be, and that there's no such thing as coincidence. Every little item that's going down has a purpose. In an interview, Harrison stated that While My Guitar Gently Weeps was a simple study based on that theory, and decided to write a song based on the first thing he saw upon opening a random book. That first thing happened to be the words, "Gently Weeps." He then put the book down and started writing. The now officially released Escher demos gives us the first known recorded version featuring double-track guitars and vocals. What's amazing about this early version is just how complete the song already is in its construction. There are some lyrical differences and an ending that of course doesn't fade out, but otherwise it's all there. All the chord changes and the song's distinctive melody lines will carry over to the final version with very little or nothing change. Listening to the Escher demo, I can hear the excitement in George Harrison's voice. This is a new song, and he's clearly very proud of it.
I look at you all, see the love that's sleeping, while my guitar gently weeps.
But the song would still have some growing pains on its way to the now familiar final album version that we all know. Harrison would first experiment using a sparse arrangement of acoustic guitar and harmonium.
I don't know why nobody told you how to unfold your love.
This early version, while melancholy, would soon give way to a much darker, much heavier sounding version that would be on the final album. Part of this came about when Harrison invited his friend Eric Clapton to contribute to the recording. The story goes that Harrison could not get the other Beatles to take the song seriously. Unsatisfied with his own guitar work on the song, he invited friend Eric Clapton to the studio to help him work on it. Eric Clapton's status among musicians was already legendary even at this stage of his career, and reportedly when Harrison showed up with him unannounced, the other Beatles took notice and started taking the song very seriously. Eric Clapton's contribution to the final recorded version of this song is not to be underestimated. Make no mistake that George Harrison wrote a brilliant song in the first place, but one comparative listen between the now available early version and the album version make it clear just how much one player can add to a great song and make it even greater. The song opens with a very much in the background acoustic guitar playing a very precise strum pattern. George Harrison's strum pattern on this song is precise and played exactly the same way. Dum da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dum. Interestingly enough, until I actually started to research this video, it's never occurred to me that that's how George Harrison plays it. For decades now, I've always played it and sung it like this. I look at you all, see the love there that's sleeping, while my my guitar gently weeps. I have to admit, I find it ironic that even though the song is called While My Guitar Gently Weeps, the guitar is very buried during this introduction. Two things stand out in front of George's acoustic rhythm track. First, the simple but cutting single-note bass line that strikes right from the first beat. This bass is so deep-sounding that for a long time I wondered if it was double-tracked or perhaps doubled with the same notes played on the low E and A strings of an electric or acoustic guitar, and then mixed down so as to give an extra depth to the bass guitar notes. Thanks to Patreon supporter Jeff Mills, who was kind enough to send me the Rock Band stems for this song, which allowed me to better isolate the tracks. I now know that the bass line is in fact doubled on electric guitar. I would assume that this is Paul playing the electric guitar double and not John. Second and foremost during the intro is the pulsating piano melody. This pulsating note that I just played for you to me, what this symbolizes is it's the musical equivalent of someone telegraphing you a message. If you've ever seen one of those World War II movies where they're sending the message in Morse code, this is what I feel it musically symbolizes. It's basically telling you, pay attention. Something important is about to be telegraphed to you. And what that something is the melody of the chorus, which comes right after. You know, Beatles fans, we've been hearing this song for decades now. We've probably all heard it thousands of times by now. But try to remember when you first heard it. You had no idea what you were about to hear. And this opening piano line is basically telegraphing to you the melody of the chorus before you hear it. While my guitar gently weeps. It's not a note for note match, but it's very close. Good songwriting is always a combination of repetition and variation. By telegraphing the main melody of the chorus to you at the song's introduction, you've already had one repetition before you hear it. This makes the chorus just that much more catchy when you do hear it for the first time with vocals. The piano that was used for this track was slightly out of tune, and that only adds to the melancholy effect. This slightly out of tune piano creates a slight vibrato effect to the single notes being played and helps add an eerie texture to the song. Ringo's opening drum line also needs to be mentioned. It's another example of how Ringo would play to the song versus play the song. The opening drum line is a simple 2 beats on the bass drum and an open hi-hat accent. And I have heard some drummers refer to it as a swampy hi-hat accent. He plays this and only this for the first 36 seconds before bringing in a drum fill. During the opening verse, Ringo plays the exact same drum line as the intro, only he substitutes the snare for the hi-hat. It's a very subtle change, and it's a change that you hear more subconsciously than consciously. It subtly darkens the song's tone and is one of the many textures that will help the song build to its dark closing. Ringo plays this very simple drum riff till about the 50-second mark before launching into pretty much the same drum fill that he did before the verse, only now it's to signal the song's pre-chorus. And it's during this pre-chorus that Ringo finally launches into a full-on drum beat. He knows that there is going to be an epic feel to this song and that he needs to build his drum part slowly and dramatically. And this is what sets Ringo apart from your average, ordinary bargain basement drummer. Most drummers would have launched into a standard drum beat within the first 30 seconds of the song, if not right from the first beat. And if you had told them, hey, try playing it like this, they would have dismissed it as too simple. Most drummers would have been more interested in just simply drumming. Ringo is interested in highlighting both the song and the other players. He is not playing the song, he is playing to the song, and he is arranging his drums to highlight the song and make it stronger. So let's look at the chord structure of this song. While My Guitar Gently Weeps is built around what is referred to commonly as a line cliche. We have a minor chord with a descending bass line. In this case, it's A minor. I mentioned this in my Led Zeppelin versus Spirit video, and like Stairway to Heaven, While My Guitar Gently Weeps is not content to just play the line cliche, it adds in different variations. Once again, if it was just the simple line cliche, it would sound like this. While My Guitar Gently Weeps takes this line cliche and does two different variations with it. The variation on verse 1 starts with an A minor. I look at you all. It goes to G. See the love that's. Then it goes to F. Sleeping. Goes back to A minor. While my guitar goes to G. Gently weeps. Goes to D. And then to the E7th. This is a really good chord progression, and George Harrison could have just chosen to repeat it for the second verse, but he doesn't. Instead, he gives us another variation. Now, once again, we have the line cliche, A minor over a G, A minor over an F sharp, but then F, just like the first time. But then we go A minor to G, to C, to E. It's a substitution of just one chord, but it makes a big tonal difference as it builds to the pre-chorus. At this point in the song, it does the unexpected and changes key signatures from the key of A minor to the key of A major. I don't know why nobody told you how to unfold your love. And there's this little walk-up that McCartney does here. And this is repeated again. And then once again, that little walk-up that I just played for you leads back into the key of A minor. I look at you all. Very interesting that it changes keys from its minor to its relative major, just like that. And it hardly even seems noticeable. It's just very natural sounding. The song then returns for another two verses, and then we have Eric Clapton's first solo played over the same chord change as the verse, and this builds to a repeat of the pre-chorus. Now at this point, George Harrison could have just sung the exact same pre-chorus and no one would have noticed. Instead, he gives us an alternate pre-chorus lyric. We then get the final two verses. Now, if you listen to the second half of the last verse, there is a peculiar vocal flutter. This occurs right after George sings, "I look at you all, see the love there that's sleeping, while my guitar gently weeps." Just before the last line of lyric, where he sings, "Look at you all," you can hear a faint "I look" in the background, just before the actual opening line. I've always wondered if this was deliberate or just a bleed-through from a previous take. If it's a bleed-through or an accident, it's a happy accident. Even if this was not the intention, it can be interpreted as George starting to sing a final verse before cutting himself off to instead scold the world. All through the song, he has been observant as in, "I look at the world." But in the final verse, he is condemning and says, "Look at you all." There's even an unnaturally long pause to highlight this supposed intent of admonishment before he sings the final, "Still my guitar gently weeps." This is followed by Eric Clapton's second guitar solo, which does the literal musical equivalent of crying. This is accompanied by George, who vocally wails and moans as the song fades out. This closing is performed over the first verse chord progression. Paul's bass line is subtly altered on this last section to include triplets. Similar to Ringo Starr, Paul McCartney starts his bass line very simply, just single notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But by the time he gets to the pre-chorus, he has now added triplets. 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4. And that's highlighted even more as we get closer to the end when we have the electric guitar doubling over it. Paul McCartney's playing is very restrained until we get to the melodic bass line that he plays during the pre-chorus. This gives the closing a much more militaristic feel and adds an extra texture of sadness to the song's closing. George Harrison's wailing is him crying at humanity, who is marching not to enlightenment in the way that he would like to see, but towards darkness and despair. This is a theme that George Harrison would repeat in his solo effort, "Isn't It a Pity, From All Things Must Pass." In this song, as in "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," George Harrison looks sadly at a society that seems doomed to keep repeating negative and destructive behavior, crying, "Isn't it a pity? Isn't it a shame? How we break each other's hearts and cause each other pain." Ask me what is the most life-affirming track in the Beatles catalog, and I will say Penny Lane. Ask me what track is the darkest in their catalog, and I will say While My Guitar Gently Weeps. While My Guitar Gently Weeps is one of the Beatles' darkest songs because it is coming from the point of view of someone who sees the potential in mankind to be great, but fears that mankind would rather march towards oblivion than to greatness. And somewhere in an alternate universe, the saddest motion picture in the world portrays exactly this. Mankind hell-bent on destroying itself, and the movie is bookended by both "Isn't It a Pity" at the beginning and "While My Guitar Gently Weeps" at the end.